A familiar face in the courtroom. Judge Melinda Turner walked slowly down the long, echoing hallway of the courthouse, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Each step was deliberate, as if the weight of years of experience was pressed into her every movement. The courthouse was bustling with activity as lawyers, clerks, and defendants hurried about their business. But Melinda's focus was singular. Today marked a significant anniversary, one she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. 15 years had passed since her daughter, Lily, had vanished. The day Lily had disappeared without a trace still haunted Melinda's dreams. It was a pain that she carried with her every day, a wound that refused to heal no matter how many years passed. For a judge who had prided herself on her ability to maintain control and emotional detachment in the face of countless heartbreaking cases, Lily's disappearance was the one thing she could never fully process. It had become the silent ache in her heart, the shadow that followed her wherever she went. As Melinda entered her chambers, she took a deep breath and steadied herself. Today, like every other day, there was work to be done, cases to preside over, decisions to be made. But beneath the surface, something stirred in her, an unease she could not explain. It wasn't just the anniversary of Lily's disappearance that troubled her. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, a feeling that something would happen today that would forever alter the course of her life. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her black robe with practiced precision. Her hair, a mix of silver and deep brown, was pulled back into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, a style she had adopted years ago to maintain the air of professionalism and authority she was known for. Her sharp blue eyes, though slightly clouded with age, still held the intensity that had made her one of the most respected judges in the country. At 58, Melinda had seen it all. She had sat through murder trials, high-profile corporate cases, and emotional family disputes. Yet none of it compared to the unending grief she carried from the day Lily had vanished. She gazed at her reflection for a moment longer, her fingers brushing the edge of the desk as she recalled the last time she had seen her daughter. Lily had been 22, full of life and ambition, with a bright future ahead of her. She had always been so passionate about helping others, a trait that Melinda admired deeply. But one night, Lily simply disappeared. There were no signs, no clues, no answers. Just an empty room and a heartbroken mother left behind. With a deep sigh, Melinda closed her eyes for a moment, pushing the painful memories to the back of her mind. She had learned long ago how to compartmentalize her grief, locking it away whenever she was in the courtroom. The cases demanded her full attention, and today would be no different. She would face the world with the same poise and professionalism that had earned her respect, even if it meant burying her personal pain beneath a mask of authority. Her assistant, Rachel, knocked on the door before entering with a stack of case files. "Your Honor, the case for today is ready," she said, her voice soft but efficient. Rachel had worked with Melinda for over a decade and had become more than just an assistant. She was a trusted confidant who knew when to push and when to give Melinda space. "Thank you, Rachel," Melinda replied, her voice steady. "Let's get started." Rachel handed her the stack of papers, but Melinda barely glanced at them. She was lost in thought, her mind drifting back to the morning's events. She had woken up earlier than usual today, the weight of the anniversary pressing down on her from the moment her eyes opened. She had spent the first few hours of the day searching through old photographs of Lily, trying to find some clue, some answer that would explain where her daughter had gone. But there was nothing. Only memories of a life that had once been full of promise, now swallowed by the dark abyss of uncertainty. "Are you okay, Your Honor?" Rachel asked, concern lining her voice as she watched Melinda's expression soften with grief. Melinda forced a smile, a thin, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Rachel. Just tired, I suppose." The day's case was a robbery trial. The defendant, a young man named Darnell Johnson, who had been accused of stealing from a local store. Melinda had presided over similar cases before, and while the details of the crime were important, they didn't seem to register with her today. Her mind kept returning to the necklace, the one that Darnell was wearing as he sat in the defendant's chair. It wasn't just any necklace. To an observer, it might have appeared like a simple, unassuming piece of jewelry. A small circular pendant with intricate patterns hanging from a thin silver chain. But to Melinda, it was anything but ordinary. The moment her eyes landed on it, a jolt of recognition shot through her chest. Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. It was her daughter's necklace, the one Lily had worn almost every day until the day she disappeared. Melinda's fingers clenched into fists at her sides as she tried to steady her breathing. She couldn't be sure. After all, the necklace had been lost along with Lily. It had never been recovered, and Melinda had always assumed it had been stolen or lost in the chaos of her disappearance. But here it was, hanging from the neck of a man she had never seen before. She tried to focus on the trial, to push aside the mounting tension in her chest, but it was impossible. The familiar design on the pendant, the way it glinted in the light, was enough to send a wave of dizziness through her. Melinda gripped the edge of the bench in front of her, her vision starting to blur as her pulse raced. Her thoughts began to spiral, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. "Your Honor, we're ready to proceed," the prosecutor said, his voice pulling Melinda from her daze. She blinked, trying to refocus on the case at hand, but the necklace remained in her thoughts, occupying every corner of her mind. There was no mistaking it now. This was no coincidence. Somehow, this man, this criminal, was connected to her daughter's disappearance, and Melinda had to know how. "Mr. Johnson," Melinda's voice cut through the courtroom, steady but tinged with an urgency that surprised even her. "Would you stand for a moment?" Darnell Johnson looked up at her, his expression a mix of confusion and wariness. "Yes, Your Honor." "I need to know," Melinda continued, her voice low but firm. "Where did you get that necklace?" The courtroom fell silent, all eyes turning to the judge and the defendant. Darnell shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering toward the necklace, then back to Melinda. It was a family heirloom," he said, his voice quiet. "My mother gave it to me before she passed." Melinda's heart skipped a beat. "Your mother?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor," Darnell replied, fidgeting in his seat. "She said it had been passed down through generations. It's very special to our family." Melinda felt a cold chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary necklace. It was the same one Lily had worn, her daughter's precious heirloom, lost all those years ago. Suddenly, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The air in the courtroom felt thick, suffocating, and Melinda's vision began to blur again. Her breath quickened as she tried to focus on Darnell, but his face seemed to twist and distort in her mind. The connection between him and Lily, the necklace, and the years of unanswered questions all came crashing down on her at once. "Who was your mother?" Melinda's voice trembled, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. Darnell hesitated before responding, his gaze shifting nervously. "Her name was Lily Johnson," he said softly. "But she passed when I was young." Melinda's heart stopped. The name, the same name as her daughter's. It was too much. She stumbled backward, her head spinning, the room around her spinning as well. And then everything went black. A painful reunion. When Judge Melinda Turner regained consciousness, the first thing she felt was the sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic. Her senses slowly began to return, and as she blinked her eyes open, the disorienting blur of fluorescent lights overhead gave way to a more familiar view. White walls, a few medical charts hanging from the side of the bed, and the faint hum of medical equipment. For a moment, she simply stared, unable to process her surroundings, as though still caught between the world of the living and some strange, unfathomable dream. "Your Honor, Judge Turner." A voice broke through her thoughts, gentle but firm. Melinda turned her head slowly, her vision adjusting to the presence of her assistant, Rachel. The younger woman's face was creased with concern as she hovered near the edge of the bed, watching her with wide eyes. "Melinda," Rachel said again, this time with more urgency. "How are you feeling?" Melinda's mind was still clouded, her thoughts scrambled by what had just happened in the courtroom. Darnell Johnson's words, his confession that his mother's name was Lily Johnson, echoed in her mind, and the haunting image of her daughter's necklace around his neck burned into her memory like a brand. But none of it made sense. How could this man have that necklace? Was it just some bizarre coincidence, or was something far more sinister unfolding? Rachel noticed Melinda's gaze, her eyes distant and searching, clearly trying to put the pieces together. "You passed out, Your Honor," Rachel continued, her tone gentle but with an undercurrent of anxiety. "It was after you spoke to the defendant, Darnell. We had to call an ambulance, but you've been unconscious for nearly an hour. You were so disoriented. We weren't sure what happened." Melinda's hand moved instinctively to her forehead, trying to clear away the fog that lingered. The weight of the situation pressed on her chest. "The necklace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was her necklace. I saw it, Rachel. It was the same one my daughter wore." Rachel's face shifted from concern to confusion. "What do you mean, Judge Turner? Do you think Darnell?" "I don't know yet," Melinda replied, her voice shaking as she tried to sit up in the hospital bed. "But everything. It's too much of a coincidence. That necklace, it belonged to Lily. It was passed down from generation to generation. How could he have it?" Rachel's brow furrowed, clearly unsure of how to respond. "But we don't know for sure, Your Honor. This could be a mistake, some sort of mix-up. You said he mentioned his mother, and we both know there are plenty of people named Lily Johnson. We can't jump to conclusions." Melinda, though weakened from the collapse, felt a surge of urgency deep within her. She couldn't afford to dismiss this. Everything in her told her that this was not just a random incident, not just a trial for a common thief. The necklace, the name, was far too significant. The connection was undeniable, and the memories that had long lain dormant were now demanding to be confronted. Her eyes locked onto Rachel's, her voice tight with resolve. "I need to see him. I need to speak to Darnell Johnson again." Rachel hesitated. "Judge, you've just woken up. You need to rest. The doctors said." "I'm not resting until I get answers," Melinda interrupted, her voice sharp with authority. "This man, his mother, everything in me is telling me that this is connected to Lily's disappearance. I need to know what happened to her." Rachel stood silent for a moment, and in that space, Melinda felt the weight of all the years she had spent without knowing what had happened to her daughter. All the endless nights of wondering, the unanswered questions, the cold fear that had never left her. She couldn't wait any longer. She would face whatever truth was buried in this case, no matter how painful it might be. "Okay," Rachel said softly, finally relenting. "But I'll be right there with you. Let's make sure you're up to it first." Later that day, after being cleared by the doctors and insisting on leaving the hospital against their advice, Melinda made her way back to the courthouse. Her steps were unsteady, her body still recovering from the fainting spell, but the urgency that pulsed through her veins kept her moving forward. She couldn't let this go, not without answers. The courtroom was quiet when she arrived, the noise from the outside world muffled by the heavy oak doors. Melinda sat at her bench, her eyes fixed on the empty defendant's chair where Darnell Johnson had sat earlier. Her mind raced with questions, each one more troubling than the last. What was Darnell's connection to Lily? Why would his mother have held onto that necklace? And why did his mother, a woman she had never heard of before, bear the same name as her daughter? The door to the courtroom creaked open, and Rachel entered, followed by a bailiff who led Darnell Johnson into the room. The young man's face was as stoic as it had been earlier, though now a sense of nervousness lingered in his posture, his shoulders hunched slightly as if bracing for something. Darnell was seated in front of Melinda's bench, his eyes flickering uneasily between her and Rachel. The room felt thick with anticipation. Melinda was silent for a moment, allowing the tension to settle before speaking. "You know why you're here, Mr. Johnson," Melinda began, her voice measured but strong. "You wore a necklace during your trial today. A necklace that you claim belonged to your mother." Darnell nodded slowly, his fingers twitching where they rested in his lap. "Yes, Your Honor. My mother gave it to me before she passed. It's an heirloom in our family." Melinda's blue eyes never wavered from his, searching, probing. "Tell me more about your mother, Mr. Johnson." Darnell swallowed hard, and for a moment, his gaze dropped to the floor. "Her name was Lily Johnson," he said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of sadness. She was a woman of mystery. She kept to herself a lot. She didn't talk about the past much." The air seemed to grow heavier at his words. Melinda's pulse quickened. "Lily Johnson," she repeated, feeling the weight of the name on her tongue. "How long ago did she pass?" 6 years ago, Darnell answered, his voice growing softer as he spoke. "I was just a kid when she died. I didn't understand much of what she kept hidden from me. But after she was gone, I found out things I wish I hadn't known." Melinda leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "What things, Mr. Johnson? What did you find out?" Darnell's eyes flickered with uncertainty, as if the weight of his mother's secrets were too much for him to bear. "I found letters. Old ones. Letters she wrote to someone. Someone named Melinda Turner." Melinda's breath hitched in her chest. Her name. She had expected many things, but this was too much. Darnell continued, his voice trembling now. "I found out that my mother knew you, Judge Turner. She knew you better than I ever could. She said you were close once, but she never said why you weren't anymore. She told me about Lily Turner. She said you lost her, that something terrible happened." Melinda's heart pounded in her chest. Lily Turner, her daughter's name. There it was again. The pieces were coming together in a way that felt too unreal to comprehend. Yet everything inside her screamed that it was true. The truth was waiting for her, buried deep in the secrets of the past. "You knew my daughter." Melinda's voice barely rose above a whisper. "You knew her, Darnell." He nodded slowly, his face a mixture of sadness and regret. "Yes, Your Honor. I knew her. I saw her once. She was friends with my mom before she vanished. She wore that necklace, just like my mother did." A wave of dizziness washed over Melinda. The revelation was too much to process. The connection between Darnell and her daughter was real, undeniable. And now she had to face the truth she had spent years avoiding, the truth that would finally explain Lily's disappearance. Melinda stood, her voice shaking but resolute. "I need to see those letters, Darnell. I need to know everything your mother knew, because whatever this is, it's tied to my daughter. And I'm going to uncover the truth, no matter what it costs." The unraveling of truth. Melinda felt the weight of Darnell's words hang heavily in the air, like an oppressive fog that clouded everything around her. The pieces of the puzzle that had seemed so distant, so elusive, were now falling into place, one painful revelation after another. Her daughter, Lily, had somehow been connected to this young man's mother, who had been hiding secrets of her own. Secrets that, it seemed, had been buried for far too long. Secrets that Melinda had to uncover, no matter the cost. As Darnell sat across from her, his shoulders hunched in an almost defensive posture, Melinda's mind raced. The truth was slipping through her fingers like sand. She had always prided herself on being a woman of logic and order, a judge who could see through the murky waters of human deception. But now, the very foundation of her life was being shattered. Lily Turner, her precious daughter's name, was intertwined with a woman who had lived in shadows, a woman whose death had left behind more questions than answers. "You said your mother wrote letters, Darnell." Melinda's voice was soft, yet firm, each word weighted with the force of the storm brewing inside her. "Letters to me. I need to see them. I need to know what she knew about Lily, about everything." Darnell shifted in his seat, his fingers twitching nervously as if he were uncertain of what to reveal next. His eyes avoided Melinda's, as though he feared her reaction, but she knew she couldn't back down now. She had to know. She had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. I don't have them here, Your Honor, Darnell admitted, his voice shaky. I found them in my mother's things after she passed, but I didn't understand everything. She never told me who you were to her, not really. But the letters, they spoke of you, and of Lily Turner. I didn't know how it all fit together. Melinda felt a tightening in her chest, a mix of hope and dread. Where are the letters, Darnell? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Please, I need to see them. I need to know what your mother knew. I need to know why she kept them. What was her connection to my daughter? To me. I kept them locked away, Darnell said, looking up at her now, his face conflicted. But I didn't know what to do with them. After you collapsed in court, I realized that whatever my mother knew, it's important. More than I ever thought. Melinda felt the floor beneath her seem to shift. Darnell, I need to know where they are. Please, if you care about finding out the truth, you have to show me. There's no more time to waste. His gaze softened, and he nodded slowly. I'll bring them to you. But you have to promise me something, Judge Turner. You have to promise me that you won't judge my mother too harshly. I know she kept things from me, but she had her reasons. I think she was protecting you. Protecting both of us. Melinda's mind reeled at his words, trying to piece together the implications of what he was saying. Protecting us from what, Darnell? What was she hiding? He hesitated again, clearly struggling with his own emotions. I don't know, but I think it's something big, something dangerous. I don't know if you're ready for it, but you deserve to know the truth. With that, Darnell stood up and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy as he left the courtroom. As the door closed behind him, the silence that followed felt suffocating. Melinda's pulse quickened. She had crossed a line now. There was no turning back. Hours later, as dusk fell over the city, Darnell returned to the courthouse, this time carrying a small leather-bound box. The box was worn, its edges frayed from years of handling, but it was clear that it held something of immense importance. Melinda sat in the same seat where she had collapsed earlier, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to approach. Darnell set the box down on the table in front of her and looked at her one last time before turning to leave. I don't want any part of this anymore, Judge Turner. My mother's secrets are hers. I just hope you find what you're looking for. With those final words, he was gone, leaving Melinda alone with the weight of the past in front of her. She reached for the box, her fingers trembling as she undid the leather strap that held it shut. Inside, she found a stack of old, yellowed letters, their edges curling with age. Each letter was carefully folded, the paper crinkling as she picked one up. The faint scent of lavender and old ink filled the air as she unfolded the first letter, her hands shaking from the anticipation. The handwriting was elegant, almost too perfect, and the first words leaped out at her. My dearest Melinda. Melinda's breath caught in her throat as she read on. The letter began with a sense of deep affection and nostalgia. It spoke of times long past, of the close bond between the two women, how they had shared dreams, secrets, and even fears. But the letter quickly turned darker as it spoke of a decision that had haunted the writer, a decision made out of fear. Fear for Melinda, fear for Lily, and fear of the consequences that would follow. Melinda, there is so much I never told you, so many things I wish I could take back, but I cannot undo what has been done. The words grew more cryptic as the letter continued, speaking of a dangerous man, a man who had once been close to both women, a man whose shadow loomed large over their lives, a man whose secrets had intertwined with theirs in ways that would forever alter the course of their futures. He was the one who took her. He was the one who stole Lily from us, and I have been hiding this truth from you for all these years because I feared the price we would have to pay if you knew. But now I have no choice but to reveal it. Melinda's breath quickened as she read those words. Her mind raced, each sentence a brutal revelation. He took Lily. The words rang in her ears like a drumbeat, each word crashing against her heart. She read on, desperate for more, but the next words stopped her cold. I never wanted to put you in danger, Melinda, but the man who took Lily is still out there. He's been watching us all this time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. You need to know that the necklace you saw in that man's possession, it's not just a symbol of our past. It's a key to unlocking the truth of what really happened to Lily. Melinda's hands gripped the paper so tightly it nearly tore as her mind struggled to comprehend the gravity of the message. Her daughter, taken by someone. And the necklace was somehow tied to it all. How? Why hadn't she known any of this before? What had her friend, her sister in spirit, been hiding from her all these years? Her head spun as she turned the page, only to find more cryptic messages. Each letter from the past seemed to reveal more questions than answers. Yet one thing was clear. There was something darker, something far more dangerous, lurking behind the disappearance of Lily. The truth was no longer a matter of finding her daughter. It was about facing the demons of the past, demons that had been hiding in plain sight for far too long. With trembling hands, Melinda stood, the weight of the letters in her hands. There was no turning back now. The secrets that had been hidden for years were finally coming to light, and whatever awaited her, she was ready to face it. One thing was certain. The truth would not be easy, but it was a truth that would change everything. The shadow of the past. The evening air outside the courthouse was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement and distant smoke. As Melinda walked down the narrow hall leading to her chambers, her mind churned with the revelations contained in the letters. The words haunted her, taunting her with their cryptic nature. He was the one who took Lily. Who was this he? And what kind of man had Lily's mother, her close friend, been trying so desperately to protect her from? Melinda had thought she was prepared for whatever truths these letters might hold. She had lived with the agony of not knowing what had happened to her daughter for 15 long years, buried under layers of denial and unanswered questions. But now, with each passing moment, she realized just how little she truly understood about the disappearance of Lily. Her heart thudded as she pushed the door to her chambers open. The room was bathed in the soft light of a desk lamp, casting shadows across the walls that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. Melinda let out a deep breath, steadying herself, and placed the stack of letters on her desk, her fingers lingering on the edge. The necklace, the man, and now the letters. Everything pointed to something far darker than she could have ever imagined. She couldn't shake the image of Darnell Johnson's face, the look in his eyes when he spoke of his mother's mysterious past. There was so much he hadn't told her, so much left unsaid. But for now, the answers she sought lay in these letters. As she sat down behind her desk, Melinda slowly unrolled the second letter from the box, her eyes scanning the delicate, looping script that seemed to hold a weight of its own. The second letter was different in tone from the first. It was less nostalgic, more urgent. The words were a stark warning. Melinda, my dearest friend, there are things I must confess to you now. Things I never told you before, not even when you asked, because I feared what would happen if I did. You must understand, I did this out of love. For you and for Lily. Please, forgive me. The man who took Lily. His name is Arthur Riker, and he is no ordinary man. I've known him for years. He came into our lives in the most unexpected way. But once he did, it was as though he had cast a shadow over everything. He is not what he seems. He never was. But what he has done, what he will continue to do if he is not stopped, is beyond comprehension. Melinda's heart raced as the name Arthur Riker struck her like a bolt of lightning. Riker. She knew the name, but only from the edges of her memory. He had been a name whispered in back alleys, murmured in hushed conversations in law enforcement circles. A man of power, of wealth, of connections. A man who always seemed to be 2 steps ahead of the law. But beyond that, his presence had never truly penetrated her life. Until now. The letter continued, the words becoming more fragmented as though the writer was overcome with emotion. Arthur Riker is dangerous. You need to understand that. He isn't just a man. He's a force of nature, and when he gets what he wants, there's no stopping him. I tried to protect Lily from him, but in the end, I failed. I made mistakes, Melinda. I trusted the wrong people, and now I fear for both of you, for everything that I've kept hidden. Melinda's eyes blurred as she read the words again, trying to piece together the fragments of her memory. Arthur Riker, where had she heard that name before? And why did it feel like an old wound reopening? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something personal about this, that Riker had been involved in Lily's life in ways she hadn't yet understood. Her mind spun with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Had he been the one responsible for Lily's disappearance? Had he somehow manipulated events, pulling strings from the shadows? And if so, why? What did he want with her daughter? What had she missed all those years ago? The letter's next words only deepened the pit in her stomach. Melinda, I have failed you. I have failed Lily. But there is one thing I can do now. I can give you a chance to stop him. There is a key, a physical key, that will open a door to the truth. It's hidden, deep in the place where it all started. The necklace you see Darnell wear. It's the key. You must take it from him. You must use it to find the answers. But I warn you, the cost of that truth will be high. If you go down this path, you may not be able to come back from it. Be prepared, my friend. This is not a fight you are meant to win alone. The letter trailed off, the final words fading into an undecipherable scrawl. Melinda's hands trembled as she put the letter down. The weight of its contents settled over her like a cold shadow. The necklace, the key. It was clear now that the necklace Darnell wore was not just an heirloom. It was a symbol of something far darker, something that tied him to the tragedy of her daughter's disappearance. And she had to get it from him. But what had Lily's mother meant by the cost? What price would she have to pay to unlock the truth? Melinda didn't know, but the answers were now within reach, and she couldn't stop herself from seeking them out. The next day, Melinda found herself pacing the halls of the courthouse once again, the relentless pull of the letters gnawing at her mind. She had to meet with Darnell again. There were still so many questions, so many pieces missing. The key, the necklace, was the only lead she had, and if the letters were to be believed, it was the only way to find the truth. Her mind was made up. She had no choice but to confront him, to take the necklace if necessary. But something inside her hesitated. Could she really take it from him? Was it right? But even as she asked herself these questions, she knew there was no turning back. As the courtroom doors opened, Darnell walked in, his expression unreadable. Melinda noticed that he seemed even more guarded than before, his eyes flicking nervously to the bench where she sat. He knew something was coming. He could feel it in the air. "Your Honor," Darnell said quietly as he approached her. His voice was softer now, tinged with a quiet fear. "You wanted to see me." Melinda's heart raced as she looked at him, a surge of conflicting emotions washing over her. He was a young man caught in the web of his mother's secrets, but he was also her only link to the truth. She couldn't afford to hesitate anymore. The time for uncertainty had passed. "Darnell," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. "I know the necklace you're wearing isn't just a keepsake from your mother. It's something much more important. And I need it." Darnell's eyes widened in surprise, but there was no anger in his gaze, only confusion and fear. "What are you talking about, Judge Turner?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What do you mean, it's important?" "The necklace you wear," Melinda said, her tone hardening. "It's the key to everything. It's connected to my daughter's disappearance, and I need it from you. Now." The words hung heavy between them, and Darnell hesitated, as if struggling with an internal battle. He glanced down at the necklace around his neck, his fingers brushing against the pendant as if he were weighing the decision in his mind. "I can't," Darnell said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "This necklace, It's all I have left of her. It's all I have of my mother. I can't just give it to you." Melinda's heart clenched as she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. She understood now. He wasn't just some criminal. He was a young man caught in the same web of pain and loss that she had been entangled in for so long. But the truth was too important. The necklace was the final piece, the key to unlocking the truth of Lily's fate. And she couldn't walk away from it now. "You don't understand, Darnell," Melinda said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This necklace is the key to finding out what really happened to Lily. You're connected to this story in ways you can't even begin to understand. Please, I need it. I need to know the truth." Darnell's hands shook as he slowly unfastened the necklace, his eyes locked on hers. The room was deathly silent, and in that moment, Melinda felt the weight of the past come crashing down upon her. The truth was within her grasp. She only had to take it. And as Darnell handed her the necklace, Melinda realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The journey she had embarked on was not just about finding Lily. It was about confronting the darkness of the past, about facing the demons that had haunted her for so long. And with the necklace in her hands, she was finally ready to face them. The door to the truth was now open, and there was no turning back. The reckoning of truth. Melinda's fingers closed around the necklace, its weight feeling both foreign and familiar in her grasp. The cool, smooth surface of the pendant seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't quite place, as though it had a life of its own. For a moment, she just stared at it. An intricate design, the deep blue gemstone set in the center, catching the light and casting faint shadows across the room. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol, a key. And now it was hers. But the question remained, what did it unlock? Darnell, standing across from her, watched her every move with a mixture of trepidation and confusion. His eyes flickered between the necklace and her face, the unspoken tension thick in the air. "I can't believe you're actually taking it from me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's all I have left of my mother, of everything she meant to me." Melinda didn't flinch. She knew this was difficult for him. Hell, it was difficult for her too. But the pull of the truth was stronger than any lingering sentiment. She had to know what had happened to Lily. She had to know who was responsible for the last 15 years of pain and heartache. She had no other choice. "You don't understand, Darnell," she said, her voice steady, but tinged with a sorrow she couldn't quite hide. "This necklace, it holds the answers to everything. Everything I've been searching for. It's not just a reminder of your mother. It's a clue, a piece of the puzzle. And now it's time for the truth to come out." For a long moment, Darnell didn't speak. He seemed to weigh her words carefully, his face a mix of doubt and reluctant understanding. Finally, he nodded, slowly, as if surrendering to the inevitable. "I never knew what she was keeping from me," Darnell murmured. "I didn't know she was protecting you, or that Lily's disappearance had anything to do with this necklace. But now I can see how much it means. I just hope you're prepared for what you're about to uncover." Melinda nodded, a surge of determination rushing through her veins. It was time to face whatever lay ahead. That night, Melinda sat alone in her chambers, the soft hum of the courthouse barely audible through the thick walls. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the room. On her desk, the necklace gleamed in the faint light, the blue gemstone seeming to pulse with an almost hypnotic rhythm. It called to her, whispering secrets she hadn't yet heard. With trembling hands, she turned the pendant over, studying every detail of the design, searching for any hint of what it might unlock. The letters had spoken of a key, and she knew in her gut that this was it. But how? What was she missing? Her eyes traced the lines of the pendant, following the intricate markings etched into the metal. And then, there it was, a small, nearly imperceptible seam running along the edge of the pendant. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a necklace. It was a lock. Taking a deep breath, Melinda carefully pried the pendant apart, the soft click of the mechanism echoing through the room like the sound of a door opening to the unknown. As the pendant split in two, a small compartment was revealed, and inside it lay something that took her breath away. A folded piece of aged paper. She picked it up with careful hands, her pulse quickening as she unfolded it. The paper was old, frayed at the edges, yellowing with age, and the handwriting on it was familiar. It was Lily's handwriting. The shock of it nearly knocked her breath from her lungs. How was this possible? Lily, her daughter, had written this note. Melinda's mind raced as she read the words, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you'll never forgive me, but I had to do it. I had to leave. There are things I can't explain, but I need you to know that I'm safe. I don't know when or if I'll ever come back, but I want you to know I love you. Please don't try to find me. Please. It's not safe. I'll always be with you." Melinda's hand shook as she read the note over and over again, the words becoming more and more incomprehensible with each pass. I had to leave. Am safe. It's not safe. What did it all mean? Why had Lily left? And more importantly, why had she never told her mother any of this? The note held no answers, only more questions. But there was something else in the compartment, something that caught Melinda's eye. A photograph. She reached for it, her heart in her throat, as she gazed at the faded image. It was a picture of Lily, taken when she was just a child, probably no more than 8 or 9. She was standing in front of an old house, a place Melinda vaguely recognized. It was a house that had been abandoned years ago, a place that held only painful memories. But behind Lily in the photograph stood a man, tall, dark-haired, and shadowed by the years of secrecy and hidden pasts. The man's face was partially obscured, but his eyes were unmistakable. It was Arthur Riker. The realization hit Melinda like a physical blow. Riker had been involved with her daughter. Somehow, someway, he had been a part of her life. And now, with this photograph, Melinda had the proof. But why had Lily been involved with him? What had she been doing there, at that house, with Riker? Melinda's mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. This wasn't a simple case of disappearance. This was something much darker. There was a hidden history, a connection between Riker and Lily that Melinda had never even begun to comprehend. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was only scratching the surface of something far more sinister. The note, the photograph, the connection to Riker, it all pointed to a carefully constructed web of lies and manipulation. And the worst part, she was still only beginning to understand how deep that web went. The next day, Melinda set out to visit the house in the photograph. The place that had been abandoned for years now felt like a haunting memory, an empty shell of what it once was. But Melinda knew that if she was going to uncover the truth, she had to go back to where it all began. As she approached the house, her footsteps were eerily quiet against the overgrown grass, the air heavy with the weight of years past. The house loomed before her, its windows dark and empty, the faded paint peeling off the wooden structure. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, as if the house itself held the secrets of the past within its crumbling walls. Melinda hesitated at the door, the photograph of Lily still clenched in her hand. This was the place where her daughter had been, all those years ago. And if Riker had been here, if this was where Lily had gone, it was time to face the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door, the creak of the hinges sounding like a warning. The inside of the house was dark, musty, and forgotten. Dust particles floated in the air as Melinda stepped cautiously across the floor, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. She felt the weight of the past pressing down on her, as though the house itself were trying to keep its secrets buried. But she couldn't stop now. She had come too far. She walked through the rooms, her hand brushing the faded wallpaper, until she reached the back of the house. There, hidden behind a set of shelves, was a door, small, inconspicuous, almost as if it didn't belong. Melinda's heart skipped a beat. She reached for the door handle, her hand trembling as she turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. And in the center of the room, resting on a table, was something that made Melinda's blood run cold. An old leather-bound journal. It was Lily's journal. She had seen it before, years ago, before her daughter had disappeared. But there was something different about it now. Something ominous. The journal seemed to pulse with an energy, as though it held the final secrets that Melinda had been searching for all this time. With trembling hands, she opened the journal. And as she began to read, she realized that everything she had believed about Lily's disappearance had been a lie. Everything was about to change. The final truth was closer than she ever imagined. The final revelation. The journal in Melinda's hands felt like a lifeline to the truth, a fragile thread connecting her to the daughter she had lost, and to the dark web of secrets that had surrounded her for so long. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the worn pages, the ink fading in places, but the words, though haunting, were clear. This was Lily's voice, her thoughts, her life in written form. Melinda could hardly breathe as she began to read. March 15th, 2009. I can't keep running from this. Not anymore. I need to tell Mom the truth. But how can I? How do I explain everything that's happened without destroying her? Arthur's involvement is deeper than I ever imagined. I thought it was just a mistake, a coincidence, but it's not. He's dangerous, and I've seen things that he's done, things I can't unsee. I was too naive, too trusting. I thought I was helping, but now I understand the price that's going to be paid for all this. I just wish I could go back and stop it. I wish I could warn her. Melinda's chest tightened. The writing was raw, full of anguish and fear. Arthur's involvement. Those words echoed in her mind. Riker was more than just a distant figure. He had been in her life all along, manipulating events, shaping Lily's fate. March 20th, 2009. Mom's getting closer to the truth. I can feel it. I can see it in her eyes when she looks at me. She knows something's wrong. She just doesn't understand the depths of what's happening. I've tried to keep her safe, to protect her from all of this, but I don't know how much longer I can keep lying. The necklace. I think it's time to tell her about the necklace. It's the only way she'll understand. But once she knows, there's no going back. I won't be able to protect her anymore. Melinda paused, the weight of Lily's words sinking in. The necklace. It had always been more than just an object. It was the key, as her daughter had said, to understanding everything that had happened. But why had Lily kept it hidden for so long? Why hadn't she just told Melinda the truth when she had the chance? March 25th, 2009. I'm so scared. I don't know how much longer I can keep this from Mom. Arthur is getting more desperate. He wants me to make a choice, one that will change everything. I can't make that choice, though. I won't. But if I don't, I fear he'll make it for me. I don't know what he's capable of, and I don't want to find out. I need to leave. I need to disappear. It's the only way to protect her now. But it means losing everything. Losing Mom. Losing the life I knew. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. But I can't stay. Not with him watching. Melinda's hand shook as she read the last line, the final admission of her daughter's fate. I need to disappear. Lily had known she was in danger, had known that staying meant not only sacrificing her own safety, but also potentially putting Melinda in harm's way. But how had it all gone so wrong? How had a young girl with so much promise ended up tangled in the web of a man like Arthur Riker? And what did Lily mean by the choice? What choice had Riker given her? The question surged in her mind, but as Melinda flipped to the final page, she froze. The last entry was unlike anything she had read before. It was scrawled hastily, the ink smudged as if written in a panic. There was no date, just a desperate cry for help. I've made my decision. I'm sorry, Mom. I couldn't protect you. I couldn't save us. I don't know what I've become, but I know I can't turn back now. Arthur has promised me something that could change everything, but I'm terrified of what it means. Please, if you ever read this, know that I love you. And if you find the truth, if you uncover everything that happened, don't forgive me. Don't try to understand. Just remember me for the girl I was before all of this." Melinda felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she felt as if she might collapse. The truth was spilling out of the journal in a torrent of pain, regret, and fear. Lily had been trapped in something far darker than she could have ever imagined. But what had she meant by "Arthur has promised me something"? What was this promise, and why had Lily felt that she couldn't escape it? Melinda closed the journal with a trembling hand, the weight of the words too much to bear. It was clear now that Arthur Riker wasn't just a man who had crossed paths with Lily. He was the center of everything. The man who had been manipulating her daughter, leading her down a path that had taken her away from everything she knew and loved. And worse still, he had made her choose. But what was the price? What had Lily been forced to give up in exchange for this promise? In the silence of the room, Melinda's thoughts swirled like a storm. She had spent years searching for answers, thinking the truth would be a relief. But now, with these pages in her hands, she realized that the truth came with its own unbearable weight. The truth didn't just answer questions. It raised new ones, darker ones, that Melinda wasn't sure she was ready to confront. But there was no turning back now. She had uncovered the truth behind Lily's disappearance, but she had also uncovered a world of danger, manipulation, and betrayal that she had never imagined. The pieces were finally starting to come together, but the picture was far more twisted than she could have ever anticipated. Melinda knew what she had to do now. She had to find Arthur Riker. She had to confront him, face to face, and make him pay for the life he had stolen from her. She had to free Lily, even if she couldn't bring her back. And most of all, she had to make sure that no one else fell victim to his manipulation. But as she stood up, the journal still clutched in her hand, Melinda realized that there was more to this than just vengeance. She wasn't fighting for justice anymore. She wasn't even fighting for the truth. She was fighting for her daughter's legacy. And nothing in this world was going to stop her from seeing that through. The next morning, Melinda stood outside the courthouse, staring out at the city she had spent her entire career protecting. The weight of the truth hung over her like a dark cloud, and she knew there was no going back. She had uncovered the final secret, but it came at a cost. Arthur Riker was still out there, and he had made Lily disappear for good. But Melinda wasn't afraid anymore. She had a plan. As she walked toward her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting it to be another call from her lawyer or a concerned colleague. But instead, it was a text message from an unknown number. "I know what you've uncovered, Melinda, and I know what you're planning. But be warned, if you try to confront Arthur, you will regret it. No one walks away from him unscathed." Melinda's grip tightened around her phone as the words sank in. It was a warning, a threat, but it was more than that. It was confirmation. Confirmation that Riker was watching her. He knew what she was about to do, and he wasn't going to let her stop him. But Melinda wasn't afraid. She was done being afraid. She would find Arthur Riker, and she would make him pay for everything he had done. For Lily, for herself, for the truth. As she drove toward the unknown, she knew one thing for certain. The end of this journey would be just the beginning of something far greater, and she was ready to face whatever came next.